jobs can easily be redesigned and rejigged if we value every person on earth and we want to create a place for every person. Ultimately, if we all do our little part and nudge society forward, we can all grow up to be more social and economically mature and learn to embrace differences, disabilities, and when we can throw away the word inclusion, when we don't need to talk about it, that's when it's a given and it's natural, and that's when I can retire and rest.
All right. Hey, Cassandra, thanks for joining.
Not at all.
So, look, the title of this episode is going to be A Place for Us. It's thanks to your book. So for people who see you for the very first time, hear you for the very first time, why did you call your book A Place for Us? What was the idea?
Well, I think many different ideas came when I was trying to get a title, but ultimately what I was writing about in the book was really trying to create a place where not just a physical space, but a emotional, mental space where everybody can share in whether they do or do not have any disabilities. Yeah, and that's kind of where it comes from, creating that place for all of us and finding inclusion in the true sense of the word.
Yeah. And for you, one of the aspect that really hit me is that for you it happened during childhood. It started when you were 7, right? And so one element that you mentioned is that it took you a lot of time, energy to accept, right? Losing that sense of idea of self.
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
Well, when you grow up or in any stage of life, society, your parents, they all have this idea of what life should look like. Whether, as a child for me, life should look like being able to run free and play hide and seek and catching and whatever else that all my friends are doing that was quote unquote normal. And losing my vision means I wasn't able to do that in the so-called normal way that everybody else did. And losing that ideal self to me was losing what I thought I should have been, or in my parents' case, it would have been like being able to go to school normally, do well in school, a very Singaporean dream of getting good grades. But as a child with a sight disability, when there was very little help in school, I was probably partaking in 10 or 20% of the curriculum. And there's no way you can score 99 marks if you're only looking at or digesting 10, 20% of the curriculum.
There is one element that really hit me is when you talk about how progressive it was. You are mentioning that you were trying to read from afar what was written on the blackboard, yeah? And that characters, fonts, they were turning into ants climbing a mountain. And that there was this thing inside you, that hope that if you do well, if you perform well, you're going to be okay. And this thing is going to be reversed.
Yes.
How did you, I mean, your mom's support really helped you to overcome that? How did you navigate through that?
I think I struggled for a long time, and education wasn't something I could excel in the early years. It was really very much perhaps in my early teens when I started swimming competitively that I realized that, hey, I don't need to use my eyes. I don't need to struggle to read or try and comprehend what I can maybe read about 10 or 20% or see 10 or 20% and make sense of it. I could instead focus on something I can do with sense of touch, sense of perception. When I was swimming in the pool, it was just about using the right muscles, pushing faster, counting my number of strokes to glide towards the end of the pool, make a flip, and continue on. And it's just me and the clock. Something that I could manage, I could control, and I could excel at and do well. And that's probably when I really started realizing that instead of focusing on the so many things that I cannot do, such as read 100% of what's on the blackboard or make sense of the ants that are climbing up and down the pages. I could focus and stay on something that I could do and I could do well. And that kind of turned things around for me.
How old were you when you started with that swimming at a competitive level?
I think I was probably about 12, 13, yeah.
Yeah, because you see, I mean, that's what hit me when I was reading your story. You know, like I kept having memories of my own, you know,
childhood.
Yeah, my own childhood and the differences, man. You know, like my parents, when I was 7 years old, they paid for me to get swimming lesson, and I was terrified. I finally learned how to swim when I was 10. And then later, you know, when in school there was physical education like swimming and stuff.
Yes.
I was terrified of competition. Genuinely terrified. So, you know, I would go, God bless my mom, dude. She would accept to bring me to the GP so that I would have some sort of medical certificate. Like the longest one I've ever got was 120 days.
Wow.
Like the
I would not have survived 120 days, not in the pool.
So you see the parallel, right? Like the differences between you and me, man. Like for me, I was terrified, but for you, you really went for it. You didn't try and hide or try to escape in your head, you know, in imaginatory world
because I found something that I could excel at, and I was happy doing it because I could get it. I was able to swim. I was able to do well. I was able to use the right muscles. I was able to swim faster and faster each competition and eventually win medals. What else in school? It was a bit harder. I was struggling. I was reading about 10, 20% of what's on the blackboard and struggling to make sense of all of these things in the early years. Of course, later on, my mom stopped work to help me and she spent all her time reading for me or reading to me and me recording all the textbooks into cassette tapes in those days when I was in school. That tells you how old I am. There isn't technology that like there is today where you can pull out your phone and the voice note app and just record something. It was literally cassette tapes.
You know that because you mentioned that you won medals, and in your book you mentioned that you went in other countries, right? Like in Europe, in Australia, and doing this thing like swimming competitively. That reminds me, there was this guy David Goggins. He really pushed the limit for himself. But when he explains his drive, like in his book "Can't Hurt Me," he mentioned something called the cookie jar, meaning that when he's tired and exhausted and he doesn't want to push it anymore, he will go to his cookie jar. And his cookie jar is moments of humiliation, moments of people, memories of people telling him he can't do it, you know, he's not worth it, he's not. Was there any element of, you know, anger inside you that helped you push? Or
not really. I think it was more the opposite. I even till today, it's probably something like 30 years on. I remember the first time that I did, well, I've won a couple of times by then, but it was a big enough competition that I was on the podium and they played the national anthem. I have never, ever been so proud to be a Singaporean, and I still can feel that emotion running through me today when I think back on that memory, where I knew that it was my swimming, my muscles, my strengths, my skill that made some other country play my country's national anthem.
Wow.
And that was a very, very surreal, emotional, proud moment. And if you ask me what drove me, it was more, I want more of that. I want to do that again. I want to feel that good again, over and over again. And that's what drove me.
You know, this is also one big difference between you and me. You know, I came to Singapore and I'm feeling at home in Singapore. I'm from France. I don't feel at home in France. So I'm not in the place where I'm from, right?
Yes.
But for you, this is also another big difference between you and me. It's for you decided to come back here and change things instead of going to a place where things would be easier.
Well, to me, this is home and family is here. I grew up here and I can't imagine living anywhere else, even if I had the opportunity.
Even when in places where, you know, there are more ease, you know, more facility for.
I was offered a job maybe about 10, 15 years ago in Australia. And yes, things may have been easier there. There are more things in place. But the thought of not being here, not... of course, there are things in Singapore that I don't like. I don't like the heat. I'm in the aircon all the time. And I would love the cold in Australia, but it's not going to be 365 days a year. And the family is not there. The system is different. To me, I feel Singaporean in my blood. And I think you can take me and put me somewhere else, but there's just the notion of Singapore that's always going to still be within me, and I much prefer it here. I'll just hide in the aircon and that works fine.
Shout out to the aircon.
Yeah.
So, yeah, speaking of shout outs, man, your mom, she's an absolute hero.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that hit me is that from the very start, right, when Stargard started for you,
yes.
She didn't want to give you a free pass. Like she was still asking you to do the chore, cleaning the bathroom.
Yes.
And so there was a part of me that really surprised me here, in terms of, the element of compassion, the element of, but I also understood later, by continuing reading, that what she was doing here is that she was arming you for independence. Yeah.
She was. And without what she did, I don't think I will be where I am and be able to be as independent as I am.
Yeah. There is and there is an element that hit me is that like your mom, your family, they really went above and beyond to give you support, for example, to learn how to read Braille. Like if we look at the situation right now, Braille is mandatory?
Not quite. It isn't. Whilst there is Braille, it's perhaps only offered to kids that are totally blind, meaning you have no light perception, not able to read the 10 or 20% that I was back then. So that Braille is offered at that level. But if you have some vision, then the rule of thumb is to learn how to use that vision. Although in my opinion, it's a pointless avenue because you're struggling so hard to use something that's half broken or 3/4 broken when your fingers are perfectly fine. And, why not use that instead? Why use the half or 3/4 broken pair of eyes that you can only read so little instead of fingers that work okay?
And regarding the support that you got from your family, for example, you mentioned about this doctor, God bless him, Dr. Octavio Gutierrez. He told you, so it's from your book, Cassandra, you have no choice about Stargard, no choice that you cannot see, but you can make clever choices about your destiny and who you grow up to be. You can show the world that you are just as good as anybody else. You have to find the will, and the way will show itself. So how old were you when you heard that?
8. Didn't make much sense then.
You bet.
Yeah.
No.
And it stayed with me.
Yeah. And so is it something, through your story, it's, man, at 8 years old, how do you make sense of this? For me, I turned 40 like 2 weeks ago now. and this thing resonates with me because I'm 40 years old, but at 8, the idea of making your choice, choosing your own destiny. So
it took me a couple of years, but eventually it hit home when I started winning in the pool. When I was swimming, right? Like I have a choice. I can stay focused on, hey, I can't read, I can't play hide and seek, life sucks. Or I can focus on swimming, pushing harder, training harder, and winning medals. That felt good. Everybody wants to be a winner. Everybody wants to, winning doesn't mean medals. Winning means being enough, being celebrated, showing that you can do something. And for me, it was really that if you find the will, the way would show itself. And eventually, swimming showed itself. And with perseverance, a lot of training, a lot of hours in the pool, I got there.
Yeah. And even beyond just the pool, right? Like there is that grit, man, that you really show. Like especially when Esme came into your life, like having to fight literally block by block in order for Esme to be accepted in places where she needed to come with you to support you. And so that's something that really hit me. Again, like you chose not to give up. You chose, not to run away. You chose to change things.
Yes, because I think ultimately, if we all do our little part and nudge society forward, we can all grow up to be more social and economically mature and learn to embrace differences, disabilities, and when we can throw away the word inclusion, when we don't need to talk about it, that's when it's a given and it's natural, and that's when I can retire and rest.
There is one of the stories that really hit me. Because I'm Muslim, and I didn't know, and I'm Muslim from France. I don't have a beef with dogs. Nobody in my family has any beef with dogs, But in this country, some people who are Muslim do. And what I learned in your book is where that was coming from. And actually, it's not that of a big deal. And that's something that really hit me, when you were trying to get Esme accepted in buses, you literally went to speak with Islamic authorities to get to the bottom of it.
Yes.
Yeah. Like just by working with people, literally like reaching out instead of, asking for people to understand where you were coming from. You crossed the line, you went to the other side to understand where they were coming from and see how to make it work.
Yes, because I think ultimately that's the whole fabric of Singapore, where we are multicultural, where there's a lot of religious tolerance, and it is a part of our DNA.
And regarding this element of changing things, so you became president of the DPA this year, yeah?
Yes, I did.
And so one element, like for example, my friend John is going to be on the podcast soon. He was talking about independence, dignity in one of your talks or so for promoting the book. You spoke about dignity as well.
Yes.
How Esme helped you gain dignity.
Yes.
And so what is the landscape like now, for people who struggle with disability? Because where I come from, my preconceived idea is that there are a lot of, advantages, benefits, free passes given for people who are more vulnerable. But when I was reading your book, I was like, dude, this has nothing to do with what I was thinking.
It's quite different here, where in the past, perhaps because of our Asian mindset, disability is something to be ashamed of, something to hide. And there are no free passes. I do get the personal tax relief more than you as a disabled person, but that's about it. I still have to pay income tax or every other taxes as well. And ultimately, to kind of come back to why that difference is, or why it's important to create an environment where there's more understanding towards people with disabilities and leveling that playing field. That's what really DPA stands for. And I felt that it's something that resonates with me, leveling that playing field. So for example, this year, Singapore is going to be passing the bill in Parliament on a workplace fairness legislation that would spell out what discrimination may look like, so on and so forth. And DPA is very much involved in that, how disabilities can be one of the protected characteristics of workplace discrimination. So, for example, in the past, if you're pregnant, you cannot be dismissed because you're pregnant. And with this act that comes into place, it's the same thing. With a disability, you cannot be dismissed or not employed because of your disability. And that's been something that many disabled people have struggled with for a long time, because for us to be respected, leveling that playing field so that more of us can work, more of us can have economic ability. Because ultimately, if you don't work and you're dependent on family, you don't really have a voice, because you can't choose what you want to buy. You're dependent on somebody else's charity. Yeah. But when there is employment, when you go out and earn your own money, you start being able to be independent and start being able to make some choices for yourself, even simple choices, whether I want to eat chicken rice or McDonald's. That's a choice that should be within your own power. But as a disabled person, very often these small, simple choices are taken away from us. I'm not sure if we can kind of pause this
No worries.
a moment because
It's okay. Don't worry.
there was just a delivery guy at my gate.
Okay. And but yeah, speaking of which, for people who are wondering what happened just now, so in your book you talk about the JAWS software, right?
Yes. So JAWS is for the computer.
Yeah.
What you probably heard a little while ago is something called VoiceOver, and VoiceOver is used on iPhones. It's a native a native text-to-speech software that is within the Apple environment, and it reads all the text that's on the screen.
Yeah. And so, and that's something like so this thing is incredibly useful, right? I was telling you the other day with Jim, we were struggling with the Bixby.
Yep.
So how did this thing enter your life? You learned that in school? Like, again, is it through your family?
Not really true. I was already probably way out of school by the time Apple came along, but it was amazing. But the first kind of software or equivalent of these kind of things that I used was a long time ago. It's a little device called the Parrot, and it wasn't even a phone. It didn't have a SIM card, but it was like a what do they call that? A PDA where you can store phone numbers, like a phone book, but electronic, and it talked. So you can press the numbers and then you can save it by the name. And it evolved into Nokia phones that had a software that you can buy for about $1,000 to make the phone talk. And that was a big step forward in terms of technology. And then slowly, of course, in those days, Nokia phones were able to get on the internet, and you were able to use things like ICQ or MSN to chat with people through the internet on your phone. And that was amazing. And about maybe 15 or so years ago, the iPhone came about, which then really opened up the world for blind people by another giant leap, because it wasn't just very small applications that you could use, but much more, from emails to Facebook, Instagram, and that has evolved so much. In the past, it couldn't read a picture and it would just say picture, but now it can, because of artificial intelligence, it can give you a sense of what that might be. It might just give you a little bit of a description to say that, it's a scene of a playground with children running about, or something. So I might not be able to visually identify who these children are, but at least I have some idea of what the pictures are. I remember many, many years ago when, with the old Nokia phones, I received a picture message, and I couldn't see what the picture was. And I pressed on the picture to fill the screen, and I asked my helper to describe the picture to me. What's going on? I asked her, and she was so embarrassed she ran away, because apparently I received a spam message, and it was a picture of a naked woman. Thank God I couldn't see it.
Oh man. Okay. No, yeah, that's. I keep on thinking that all those, whether it's access to innovation, etc., you have to rely on yourself for this, right? It's not like you went to school and you learn all that. So there is an element of luck, right? There
is, but I think there's also a choice that you make to follow. Like, for example, now artificial intelligence is kind of really pushing forward, and for a blind person, there are many more things. In fact, I'm looking at spending some money to buy this device that it's kind of like a bone conduction headset that you put on and you connect it to the phone. It has an app, but the device that you wear around the back of your head has a camera, so it sees whatever you see, and you can interact with it through voice. Like if I hold up a couple of different packets of tea, it could tell me what they are. Or if I'm at a restaurant, I could hold the menu like I would normally hold it. And it could read the menu, which it could in the past. I could take a photo and try and read from A to Z, but it will literally go, you have Eggs Benedict with toast, Eggs Benedict with something else, and it will go on and on and on, literally reading from the
whole menu.
Yeah, the whole menu from the top to the bottom. But with AI now, I could ask it like, can you find the cheapest thing on the menu? Or can you find a vegan dish on the menu or something? And it will pick it out, whatever it is. I've seen a podcast on it. I'm very keen to try my hands on it. In next month, I'm going to Australia, and they have a sample thing there. So I'm going to try it out. It's very exciting. That would kind of bring technology to the next level. Yeah.
And earlier you were talking about in terms of access to employment, because when I was reading your book, you were mentioning, I think the term was banana jobs that pay peanuts, and through a friend of mine, I heard a bit about this, and there are some article now in the press that talk about this situation. So what I understand is that there is some sort of discrimination, like when someone is considered with disability, for an employer, it becomes like an intellectual limitation, like literally. And that means that person doesn't have access to something that match their requirement, but instead has access to only like, the lowest of the lowest of the lowest of the lowest.
Correct.
So what can be done here?
I think it's really around two things, right? Because government can certainly say we have a law, for example, to provide reasonable accommodation for people with disabilities, that if, say, for example, a blind person, you give them text-to-speech software like JAWS so that you can use the computer and they can do their job like everybody else. That's reasonable accommodation. But I think it also takes a lot of societal will and respect and understanding that we're no different from anybody else, and we can do the same job. Yes, because of our disability, it might be a little bit different. We might not be able to do 100% of the job. We might be able to do 80% of the component of the job, but jobs can easily be redesigned and rejigged if we value every person on earth and we want to create a place for every person. I'll illustrate with this kind of thought that popped in my head. I remember when I was a little kid and I could still see, and I was in the US to check out my eyesight when I was 8. I was utterly amazed that they had regular chairs and they had giant chairs that were for people that were really, really big, at the like a food court place that I was at. And so there were chairs, and there were baby chairs for little kids. And that kind of struck me that in those days, there weren't all these options. Like you see that in Singapore now, when you go to, say, IKEA or even some hawker centers, you have baby chairs, you have regular chairs, and then you have tables without chairs. So wheelchairers can wheel under the table, wheel against the table and sit there without the chairs being in the way.
Yeah, I see. I see what you mean. Like, and having some sort of understanding, among employers, that someone with disability, provided that the qualifications are there, right?
Yes,
because that's what you were talking about, a fair and equal treatment.
Correct. And ultimately, it's about reasonable accommodation. It's not pitying the disabled person or giving them charity or shortchanging yourself as an employer. Reasonable accommodation, it's really about just leveling the playing field. And if the disabled person does not have the qualification, is not smart enough, not good enough, then yes, they should not be employed. The best description I have is actually Disneyland in Tokyo. I went to Disneyland and they gave me a Braille map of the whole place.
Wow.
Which is amazing because it allowed me to know where I'm going. And they told me that most of the rides, about maybe 80%, they will provide a ramp. So me and Esme, my guide dog at that time, could get on the rides. I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like I could like enjoy Disneyland like anybody else. They leveled their playing field. And then they told me this, but you don't get an express pass. If you want to take the express queue, you got to buy the express pass ticket. For the first 10 seconds, I was like, oh, you mean I don't get it with this magical package? And then I thought to myself, like, hey, it's fair. Because if I want people to level the playing field for me, so I have a Braille map and a ramp to get on the rides without falling down, then, which is what other regular patrons of Disneyland have, right? They have a sighted, a paper map. They have eyes or legs that they can walk up without the ramp. Then if they have to pay for an express pass to cut queue, so should I. And that's what reasonable accommodation is at the end of the day. It isn't about just giving discounts for no rhyme or reason, but just about leveling the playing field. So, a disabled person can also partake in the activity or the job or whatever it is.
Yeah. And so, but before we get there, right, that means that the qualifications need to be delivered, correct?
Yes.
So where are we on that, in terms of education?
Well, we're getting there. We're getting there slowly, I would say. In 2019, we amended some laws to make compulsory education for all citizens' children, including children with disabilities. So we are seeing, and in the school system, there is, it's not like when I was in school where there was very little help or no expertise help. Most secondary school, there are designated secondary schools, as well as in most tertiary educations, they have a a person that is responsible for all the disability matters to make the educational material more accessible. So it might be a teacher that supports the child or the student with disability to send, for example, maybe textbooks to be brailled or have diagrams made tactile so the student can understand what's going on. And that this wasn't available a long, long time ago when I was in school. So with that, we're probably going to be seeing a lot more young people with disabilities graduate from tertiary education. I think we also do need to think about, the other spectrum of it. There aren't just people like me who grew up with a disability, but there are also many, and that number will exponentially grow in the coming years because of the aging population. We're going to see a lot more people acquire disability later on in life, in their 40s, 50s, 60s, when they have a stroke, when they have an accident, so on and so forth. They lose the ability to walk or see or hear. And if we don't have reasonable accommodation at a workplace that allow these people to get back into the workforce, then it's just going to be sitting at home and doing nothing.
Yeah, and this is I'm thinking about John because that was his story. He used to work in computer graphics, and he was right-handed, and he was using his right hand to do all of that, to do like computer graphics for movies and stuff, and the stroke took that away from him, and that's how we met at the university, studying to become a counselor. Yeah, But what I'm thinking about, is regarding, the way your mom helped you and really helped you to like, she really ingrained in you, in your cells, in your DNA, man, that need to find turnarounds, right? To really find the turnarounds. Like, for example, the tech you were describing earlier. But not everybody has a mom like your mom, right? So what are the elements that can be provided? Because this is not math, right? This is not history. So what is the support that can be provided, for young people with disability to acquire that, so that it's not just, an exception, so that those things, those life skills, you know what I mean?
I think it would be really helpful that if there was a children's camp of sorts, that, how Christians, churches have Sunday camps for students, for young people. And once a year they have this camp, and next year they have the camp again, and it's always a different topic. I was quite tickled when I saw this overseas, that they have special camps for blind children who go in and learn different skills, whether it's making a sandwich, whether it's walking with a white cane, whether it's testing how it feels like to walk with a guide dog for a day. All of these throughout their lives, they're exposed to more different things and more things. It gives children the idea that there can be something different, there can be more, and they don't have to be afraid about trying something new. And, that there really isn't any worst case scenario. What happens if I buy this piece of technology that I was just talking about earlier, and it doesn't work as advertised?
Mm-hmm.
I waste some money, waste some time playing around with it and trialing it, but I think it's okay. It's not $100,000. It is $1,000 or $2,000, which I think I can afford. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't. And maybe in years to come, technology might advance enough that something else will work out.
Mm. That's, and I'm thinking, like that when it comes to adolescence, teenagehood, right? It's a challenging part, right? Like that feeling of that yearning to belong, that yearning to fit, to be part of a group. And
Yes.
for people who doesn't have disability, that's already a struggle.
Yes.
But for someone with disability, that's even
worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so in terms of support, to navigate through that, because what I've got to learn for the last 2 years is that it's easier to understand when I've been there, done that, right? When I've been through it. But the thing is that when we look at the Disabled People Association, for example, it gets everyone together, right? But there are so many differences, right? So many particularities. Like, for example, if it's an audition issue or a vision issue. So how can we provide the appropriate level of support without going for, a one size fits all approach, and really giving people that idea that the person helping them has been through that, and that's experience, strength, and hope, got to the other side. So
I think at the end of the day, what the DPA stands for, DPA is an advocacy organization. It is not a service-based organization. So we don't provide services, for example, Braille material or making print material into Braille, for example. That's a service. DPA does not do that. But what DPA does is teach disabled people, and as well as be on their behalf, advocate for the rights of persons with disabilities, be it reasonable accommodation at the workplace, be it learning how to speak up. Hey, I need this in Braille, or whatever it might be. It's the product, if I can call it that DPA sells is advocacy or self-advocacy, and learning how to, as a disabled person, speak up for yourself, and ask in a good way the things you need for yourself to function in this world. Back to the topic on like this more workshop for kids and stuff like that. There's some that's going on, like my colleague at the Disabled People's Association, Teresa, recently just ran a camp for children with physical disabilities and their caregivers. And there are things going on like that, but there isn't enough done by the organizations that represent this different disabilities, if you ask me. There can be more done, but I wish I could do more. There's only 24 hours a day.
Yeah, and that's also one element, that I was wondering, because like, you made it, you you got a career. Your daughter is what, 18 years old now, and like you could just, sit back, relax, and chill. But you got involved with the DPA, and you are still trying to change things. Where does it come from? Why are you doing this? What's driving you?
Simple. As I said earlier, I really like that feeling of Majula Singapura being played. I love my country.
It's nationalism.
Yes, it is. I want to leave it better than I came into it. And who knows, maybe I got 20, 30, 40 years more to go. And I think as it is now, as it stands now, Singapore is better than when I came into it in terms of disability and inclusion. But hopefully in another 30, 40 years more in my lifetime, it'll be even better. And if I can do whatever I can to nudge it a little bit in that direction, why not? What do I stand to lose?
And in your book, you were also talking about how it's important for people with disabilities to make the decision for people with disabilities, like some sort of, for us, bias approach. Yes.
And it's very important, because ultimately, who knows what we need more than ourselves? It's even in, say, for example, the garment industry, clothes making, for the longest time, it was always men that were the designers and so on and so forth. In the early 1900s, when women started designing undergarments for women, that's when things started changing. Or if you look at fashion, when, say, for example, in the 1920s, when Coco Chanel started designing for women, things started shifting and changing, because ultimately is the user, the consumer themselves, designing something for themselves, or having a say in what it's going to be, what their day is going to look like, what kind of clothes they're going to wear, what kind of services they're going to receive, and so on and so forth. When you have no choice, there's no dignity. It's like if your parents told you you have to study to be a doctor or an engineer, but in your heart you want to be an artist. It's not a nice feeling, is it?
Absolutely not, man. and you hit home, because I grew up, with my parents, like literally what you described. They wanted me to become an engineer. So yeah, and it caused a lot of frustration for me growing up. But
But that's just what you wanted. But imagine if it's what you needed.
Yeah.
It's even worse. Like, for example, a disabled person might say, someone in a wheelchair might say, I need a ramp to be this this angle, so that I can roll my wheelchair up. But somebody else, some engineer might say, oh, that's a wrong angle, because the math tell me so. And therefore I shall make it this other angle. But the guy on the wheelchair can't roll himself up. When he's the one using it, he's the one with the expertise, right? And he knows what he needs, because he has the lived experiences.
And what is for people without disabilities who want to help, so what is their role here then?
I think their role is very simply being a friend, being an equal. And I like an experience I have once at Heathrow when I was flying back. I had ground crew assistance to get to the plane. I was traveling alone with Esme, and this guy just kind of asked me like, hey, it's my first day on the job. I have no idea how to help or what to do. Can you tell me? You're the expert. And I didn't ask for anything very difficult. I just said, can we try and find a little patch of grass somewhere in the airport so Esme can go have a pee before the long flight home? We couldn't find it. We couldn't find the grass, but at least we tried. And, that was... just having someone hear what I needed, what I wanted, it made so much difference. When most of the time when I travel, I don't get asked what I want or what I need. And it is assumed. There was once I came out of the plane somewhere in the US, and the person coming to help came with a wheelchair and literally physically pushed me into the wheelchair. And I'm like, where am I going to put the dog? And how's the dog going to run along? I got out of the wheelchair and put my hand luggage on the wheelchair. And I said, no, I walk. Right. So that's somebody assuming what I need and what's best for me. And it makes so much difference when we have the autonomy to choose whether it's safer for us to walk or be rolled around in a wheelchair.
Yeah, it goes back with the need for dignity. And in terms of like you described just now something that is not preferable at all. In the book, you were talking also about tokenization, tokenism, and even prostituting your blindness at some point. What did you mean by that? When you talk about tokenism, rejecting tokenism.
Well, tokenism. I'm just thinking of what's a good way to put this. Very often, if you look at the idea of inclusion is something right now that is fairly trendy. It's like ESG, right? DE&I is like ESG. So if you can invite someone with a disability to a party or a panel to speak, that's checkbox DE&I. But do you genuinely want this person there? So say you're an employer and you employ someone with a disability and tell them there is no work for you to do. Just come, I'll pay you a salary, $500 a month. You just sit here every day and look pretty. So when people come to the office, I can say that I'm inclusive. I've employed a disabled person and he's my mail collector or whatever it is, right? A small job. And who knows, this guy might have a PhD in engineering or something, right? So that is tokenism. And, not just have the token disabled person there or, that sort of idea, but true inclusion to level up when someone has an ability. In this example that I was giving, if this guy has got a PhD in engineering, how can we make use of that skills? How can we make him productive?
And in terms of, if someone with disabilities is watching this or hearing this right now, just because the first guest of this podcast, Arnold, he was talking about action, taking action. And so for someone with disability listening to this, watching this right now, what is the action they can take right now in order to improve, get closer to dignity, get closer, to that acceptance? What can they do?
I would say believe that you are just as valuable as anyone else and fight for that. But going back a little bit further, I think it's a bit of a complicated statement or question because it depends on where you are on that journey of being disabled, right? You could have an accident yesterday and you're struggling with the fact that you have lost your ability to walk today. Or you could have been born like me with a sight disability and gradually lost your sight over 20 years. These are kind of two very different paths and journey for people. It depends on how long they have lived with this disability. But I would say that step one is really accepting that it's not something you can change. Disability is permanent. No magic miracle pill. No miracle is going to change that. Yes, perhaps, if it's God's will, it might, but doesn't happen all the time. And unless we are so super lucky, let's focus on what we can control, which is what can we do to live the life that we want?
Thank you. And there is that quote that you have in the book by William Jennings Bryan. Destiny is not a matter of chance. It is a matter of choice. It is not a thing to be waited for. It is a thing to be achieved. So regarding those things that you were waiting for, the things that you achieved, how would you look at your destiny right now?
Still a journey.
Yeah.
It is. Life is always a journey. There are things that I achieve, things that I have moved on from and done other things. But that's life. When you're a teenager, you're interested in one thing. When you're in your 20s and 30s, you're focused on something else. When you're older, you focus on yet a different thing again. And that's pretty much what it is. And ultimately, it's just being able to not give up, not sit there and feel sorry for yourself and say, I can't do it because I am disabled, or I can't do it because the world will not give me a chance. But to make that decision to ask yourself, how can I make it possible? How can I make it happen? If you want to go for a swim or get a job or go and have a meal, then break those steps down to figure out how that can happen. That's in your hands, your choice, how you take it, you do it.
And thinking about, your book title, A Place for Us, there is that element, right? At some point you mentioned about sometimes being relegated to social work where they belong, where they belong. And so a place where we belong.
Yes.
So what does it look like?
Wow, that's utopia. Which is what I hope to see in my lifetime, right? It's somewhere where if I go for a job interview, my past work history, my qualifications, my transcript is what the employer is going to be looking at, not under the table and looking at my guide dog and wondering, where's the dog going to pee? That's in the sense of an interview, that will be ideal, right? A place for me. You're looking at me as a person, not my disability. When if I were to be young enough again and I were to date someone and he takes me home, the parents are not going to wonder, are our grandchildren going to be disabled? Or have questions like that, or dissuade their child from having a long-term relationship with someone with a disability, right? Where we can just be seen as everyone else and who we are as people, what we need as people, the dignity we have is the same as anybody else. If you, who is not disabled, hope that your child, your loved one, your brother, your sister is going to get a chance at their interview because they are very qualified for the job, then it's going to be the same for the disabled person. And if we can see everyone the same, then that will be utopia. That will be a place for us where we belong, where the playing field is level, where there's reasonable accommodation. If an employer were to give me a job without technology for me to do my job, like a text-to-speech software to read the computer, and I can only use their computer and not bring mine, then I won't be able to do my job.
So a lot of that is focusing on the outside, right? Outside of the house.
Yes.
What about at home? Having a sibling or even a partner. So what are the elements here that people can do in order for, like you mentioned earlier, like some preconceived idea, for example, the in-laws thinking, what about the children? Will they have the disability as well? But say for someone like closer than the in-laws, obviously, it can be a partner, can be a sibling, a best friend. What are the changes needed here that you see based on your experience?
I like the way my mom did things. Maybe because that's the way I grew up. But just because we're disabled doesn't mean we need to be pitied and served and be treated like prince, princess, whatever you want to call it. Yes, of course, as a partner, sometimes, we definitely want to be loved. We want flowers and whatever else and nice words and kisses and all of that. But if, say, for example, the disabled person, let's say it's a blind person and you're going on a date and you don't have to read the whole menu from head to tail if, say, for example, they have the technology that they can do that themselves. But if as a couple, you're sitting together to decide what to eat, sure, you can discuss about it. And it's maybe also like holding the disabled person as an equal and not let me do everything for you because you're disabled, but what can you bring to the table too? Because they have something to bring to the table besides their disability. Like for me, my mom said, you wash the bathroom, just like your brother or anybody else. And we shouldn't get a free pass or a discount just because of our disability if we can do it. If we can't do it, then that's a different story. Let's see if there's technology or other ways that we can close that gap.
Thanks so much. So, but Cassandra, look, this is the end of the episode. Any last comment? Parting words?
Maybe rather than a comment, a request to those of you listening who do not have a disability, help us by going out there and opening your heart to be a friend to us. And if we have more friends, then there are bigger networks and there's more understanding in the community, and creating that place for us will become natural, because I'm sure everybody wants their friend to also have a place on the table with them.
Thank you so much. That reminds me, I need to take John on a date. Thanks a lot, Cassandra. Thank you very much.
You're most welcome.
Thank you, Shaz. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. Thank you. All right. And that's a wrap.